All right. What's going on, people? I sound like the dude from Crazy Taxi. We are here in the boss man's car as he's sharing away on this. By all means, feel free. You should do the same. Share, like, shoot us some questions, some comments. This is the live Thursday Q&A. Logan Black here, the boss man, Joey B. Glad you can join us. If you are, I know some of y'all are still filing in, just starting this, or if you're not watching it live, what's up? Last week we had mentioned wanting to maybe do an entire episode on what it was to be a wrestling fan in the 90s. Not necessarily like, oh, wrestlers in the 90s, but more of the idea behind...
I didn't even get your tag. Do you have any viewers?
Not yet.
I don't think it's live. Is it live?
It's supposed to be going, as we've got it.
I go on your page, there's nothing, it's not even here.
Nope, not going. What's up? Oh, now we're going?
Yeah.
We got it. The boss man apparently says we're going live now, and we are live. Look at that. Let's check all that junk. Anyway, so we continue. Boss man sharing. Anyway, not what it was to be a fan in terms of like, oh, I'm a fan of Stone Cold. Oh, I'm a fan of, this guy. More of what it was to be a fan before the advent of the internet. What it was to, I guess, not necessarily have the community that is wrestling right now. Not being able to walk into a Hot Topic and buy a Young Bucks or Bullet Club shirt and all that junk. To kind of, when it was not cool to be a wrestling fan. So we're going before The Rock, before Austin.
Early to mid-90s.
Right. So Joe, what are some of your earliest memories? I mean, you're going back to the 80s here.
Well, when I became a wrestling fan was October of 85. So actually I'm coming up on my 32 years of being a fan. Wrestling was okay then. As a kid, the WrestleMania era, the Rock and Wrestling Connection, the LJNs were coming out, which, the marketing towards kids with toys was big. The posters, all that was big. But as the late 80s, early 90s came around, wrestling went on like the downswing, I guess you would say. And it wasn't cool to be a wrestling fan. Like, I remember in high school, there was some wrestling fans, but we kept it quiet. It wasn't like when The Rock or Austin, probably when you were in high school, that people doing Suck It and all that NWO and all that shit. It was different. But the only way we would get stuff like now you have the network and I have YouTube or what have you, the internet, would be, oh, you got this on tape, let me borrow it and I'll dub it.
Oh yeah, no.
Tape trading.
The tape trading was big. I was I think the last bastion of tape trading back in the day when I was first breaking in was when that was starting. And what's going on, Ray? How you doing? I was gonna say I was a fan way early on. I was born in '87, so I'm giving y'all my age at this point. So 2 years into Joey being a fan, I was around. But my earliest memories of being a fan, like I remember, stuff from '89. The feuds in 1990. Earthquake versus Hogan was 1990, correct?
90, yeah, SummerSlam.
Yeah, so I was a huge. That was like the first big thing that I had gotten into was
and
Hogan.
Actually, Drake, that feud started. Earthquake attacked Hogan before WrestleMania, and then after WrestleMania, he attacked him where he was out of commission for a few months. Probably making Suburban Commanders on him. That feud lasted all the way to the Rumble of '91, where he last eliminated him in the Rumble. That kind of ended that feud. So that feud went around. Every house show, it would be... Right,
that's how it was back in the day. The house shows would have all that stuff going down. And
there's only 4 pay-per-views a year at that point.
Oh, yeah, and that was the other cool thing. Not a cool thing, but another thing that's interesting. So now we all know the pay-per-views are Sunday nights, 8 p.m. is when they start. And it's been that way for the longest time. But, Joe, do you remember how other pay-per-views ran?
Well, right. WrestleMania 1, the first one, I believe was 4 p.m. start.
Right, and what day of the week was it?
It was a Sunday.
Was it?
Yeah.
Because I know there was some. I was watching something where
I believe WrestleMania 2 was a Monday.
Yeah, running on a Monday.
Going back to WrestleMania 1, the first WWF pay-per-view wasn't WrestleMania. It was called
the Big Event.
Classic.
Yeah.
WrestleMania 1 wasn't on pay-per-view.
Wrestling Classic. I had that one.
If you wanted to see it, you would have to go to like a high school gym or a high school auditorium, and they would put it on closed circuit. They would
closed circuit, yeah.
And that's how they did it back then.
Well, that's even before my time. The 90s, it was pay-per-view. I remember going to my uncle's place, and again, no one had big screen TVs at the time either, so it was a normal TV, and all of us were fucking, like, shrunk into that house. I think it might have been the SummerSlam at Wembley, Or I could be totally wrong, but my Uncle Joe dressed up as the Undertaker because he's really tall. His buddy Jeff Jacobs, who I still keep contact with, came dressed as Roddy Piper with the kilt and all. So, like, it was a big deal, you know, when you all get together again 4 times a year. And it wasn't necessarily on a Sunday. It would kind of just be random when they were going about it.
Wow, what a fucking asshole. I don't remember many not being on a Sunday, Jake. I remember when they lost the power during, I think it was Beware a Dog. They showed stuff on.
Oh, that's like late '90s.
Yeah, mid to late '90s.
They did the Tuesday in Texas. That from Pritchard's podcast. He was saying, and then
Thanksgiving had the Starcades and some early.
Right, back in the day, Starcade was a huge wrestling day. I mean, Thanksgiving was.
So was Christmas.
As was Christmas Day.
Then Thanksgiving Eve with Survivor Series before it went to the Sunday slot.
Right.
Which I think happened. I think '94 was the last year they did on Thanksgiving Eve.
You know, that was all, you know, that kind of stuff. The pay-per-view was a big deal. So again, like Joe was saying, it wasn't cool to be a wrestling fan in the early '90s, which is when I was, you know, really getting into.
No, I would never wear a shirt or. There weren't cool shirts.
Well, I mean, there weren't. You had the Hogan shirt.
I wouldn't wear that. Well, now I would, but I wouldn't wear.
As a kid, I was a child at the time.
I wasn't.
I might wear that.
10 years on you.
I remember my buddy Kevin bought the. I think it was the Hulk Hogan, or it might have been the Ultimate Warrior. Like workout set that they were selling. It did not come with steroids, unfortunately.
Is that the one that Paul Orndorff used to do in the corner? He busted through the wall. The kid's like, how can I get muscles like you guys?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe. It might have been. And he had that, and him and I would play with. Because he was. A bunch of my friends were all like into like all different kinds of things, but the reason I think me and my buddy Kevin were best friends growing up the way we were is because we were both such huge wrestling fans. Like we were like obsessed with it. And I had other friends who were wrestling fans too, but none of them.
That's the thing.
None of them were like really, really into it.
The people that were fans and you all hung out together, that's all you would do was talk about wrestling and show. All right, I got this match. I remember I was like amazed. Somebody had again early 90, 89, 90, 91. Stan Hansen was Terry Funk on an island.
Oh boy,
and that was like the coolest thing to have. Because, you know,
see, the only thing that we would get, and again, because we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have the network, and that's the real thing that a lot of you younger people who might be watching in on this might need to recognize. This is a world without YouTube or the network. Wrestling was not in
internet.
No internet, obviously, but wrestling was not in your hands. If you wanted to watch wrestling, you either had to tune in whenever they were showing it on TV, or you can go to the local video store, because Blockbuster really didn't have too many. At least
the mom and pop places.
The mom and pop
video one
would have the Coliseum video releases.
So in the 80s, I would go and get all these like volume 1 through whatever, or the most unusual matches, and that would have a lot of stuff from the 70s on it. Johnny Rods would be on it. The Samoans.
Fuck the Samoans.
Well, Pedro Morales, Bruno, all those, you know. So I got a taste of some of the older stuff.
I remember there was that stuff. I'd get the Coliseum videos when I could. My uncle was a bit obsessive, I think the word is. I got a lot of uncles. But I had an uncle who was obsessive and collected videotapes, and he'd fucking record them, and he had literally like probably close to 10,000 VHS tapes with multiple movies on each one. So he would sometimes get this stuff and record it for me, or he'd give me movies with like Hulk Hogan in it. Because, I mean, there were no other wrestlers.
You ever see my closet downstairs in the bar?
And I don't know what's going on in your closet. That's where Scotty lives, I hear.
Soon he's going to be fucking banished to the basement.
Oh, tremendous. But that's how I would get, like, any of the wrestling stuff I wanted. Or, you know, I had uncles that would take me to the live events. That when the house shows were really, like, a big deal. So I remember going to a house show back then. I had another uncle who worked for NBC Sports in
you're talking early 90s?
In DC, yeah. And the NWA would come through. It was Maryland, and I mean, I've got the picture. You can check my Instagram of me as a baby, 4 or 5 years old, with a Big Bird shirt on, hanging with Ric Flair. Like, and again, I couldn't appreciate that as a kid. You know, now I look back at that and it's the coolest thing ever. But going back to what it was to be a fan as a kid, you can go to the store, you could buy the toys, you know, you'd bring your toys in, you'd be playing with them at lunch, and some other kid would come over and go like, oh, you like wrestling? Who's your favorite? And then like you'd strike up a friendship based on the fact that y'all like wrestling. And that was kind of how things went up until the mid 90s, like 94, 95, when it just became really, really not cool to be a wrestling fan. Because wrestling was in such a slump at that point. I was still watching because I was so obsessed. I was watching every Saturday night. I'd go to my father's place and we'd watch WCW Saturday night. I would, I couldn't stay up for Raw because I was so young for the most part, but again, usually a buddy of mine would have it taped and he'd hand me the tape, or my father would stay up, he'd tape it, and then, kind of what Joe was saying, where like we trade back and forth. I know I was listening to Rosemary on Killing the Towns today, where she talked about how she would tape Raw and her friend would tape Nitro, and they'd fucking trade every week. So, that's how a lot of us got to watch that kind of stuff, especially when the Monday Night Wars started. Which I think really brought, even though that was, 95 when it started, it brought a lot out of, made it kind of okay.
The first episode of Nitro, it started when Luger showed up.
Right, but what I'm saying is, like, it was still not cool to be a wrestling fan. Up until, Austin came through, and that changed things up big time.
I always say when the NWO came in, it was cool for the wrestling fans. But when Austin blew up and The Rock blew up, it was cool for everybody. You understand what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. Just a note, it seems to me like I might be having issues receiving questions or anything on here. Things are kind of getting iffy on here. So if you are sending questions, and we're not ignoring you, they just aren't showing up. Yeah, they're not showing up.
Hope you not set the private on there.
I wouldn't imagine.
Somebody wrote "What's up, brothers," but that was the only one I seen. Usually,
yeah, no.
How many viewers you have?
It's only 3 right now. It just seems kind of off.
Yeah.
Weird. Anyway, continue going in. Let's talk a bit more because we're almost done with this ride. But it was again without an like when the internet had first started up. I was late to get in the internet because my family was poor. But I had an uncle who had America Online, which again is a completely foreign concept to a lot of people. But you would go to the America Online WWF page, or you download.
Vince McMahon would say, "Welcome to the WWF on American Online."
Yeah, exactly. Or you would. They had like these pages where you could download pictures, videos, and again, the fucking display on these videos was god awful. And it was like a 5-second clip of like, something that happened on fucking TV, or that would be cool. But it was super interesting, kind of like the archaic ways. One of my things that was actually the way that Sunny ended up becoming like the most downloaded woman.
96.
Yeah.
Margolis.
Yeah. It's a pretty big deal for the time. But it changed things up because you could go at that point. Like, the only way that you would get to meet other wrestling fans that, like, were not in your, like, circle of friends was at live shows, or if, like, you were a supreme, like, crazy wrestling mark, which I was too young for that, at the time. But my uncles would go to indie shows, which the independents at the time were, oh my god, early 90s independents, main evented by fucking Barbarian versus,
Nikolai Volkov.
Yeah, versus Nikolai Volkov. Holy shit! Like, you go to the
question. She's a question. Now.
Good luck, Joey B, with your Staten Island street fight, brother.
Thank you. Was it Mike? What's his name?
Mike Farrar, yeah.
But Buffalo's gonna be 4-1 this week.
The thing that we go with again, once that internet started up, you have the opportunity to sit there in like these chat rooms where usually it was dudes trying to fucking get naked pictures of little kids, often. That was.
I was never in them chat rooms.
That was
Maybe your old tag team partner was in those.
Oh, listen, he's in more current chat rooms, from what I understand. But I digress. No, the usual was a lot of like sexual predators in there and shit like that. That was the famous thing, or like dudes pretending to be like. That's unrelated. But you'd get to meet other wrestling fans. So it would be like when you get into the chat room, your age, sex, location, favorite wrestler. So I think I was, Jake, 11,
I remember that.
male. I think at the time I probably would have put down Rob Van Dam. Or Sabu. And then people would and they'd like message you separate if like they were a fan of that guy and they could talk about stuff.